The United Kingdom's departure from the European Union, widely known as Brexit, marked a pivotal moment in history. This decision sent shockwaves across the globe, reshaping the political and economic landscape of both the UK and the EU. The road to Brexit was paved with fervent campaigns and divisive rhetoric, ultimately culminating in a referendum where the British public narrowly voted to leave the EU. This outcome exposed deep-seated divisions within British society, highlighting contrasting views on sovereignty, immigration, and economic integration. The years since the referendum have been marked by intricate negotiations and political maneuvering as both sides grappled with the complexities of disentangling 4 decades of intertwined policies and regulations. The process has been far from smooth, with numerous sticking points and delays testing the patience of politicians and citizens alike. Now, as the dust settles on this historic separation, a new question emerges. Could the UK ever rejoin the EU? This question ignites passionate discussions on both sides of the English Channel, with proponents and opponents citing a myriad of reasons for and against such a move. The prospect of the UK rejoining the EU is a multifaceted issue with no easy answers. It's a question entangled in a web of economic considerations, political realities, and social sentiments. On the one hand, some argue that the UK's departure from the EU has come at a significant economic cost, leading to trade barriers, reduced investment, and a decline in certain sectors. They believe that rejoining the Bloc would help mitigate these challenges, providing access to the single market and restoring economic stability. On the other hand, others contend that the UK has embarked on a new path, forging its own trade deals and reasserting its national sovereignty. They argue that rejoining the EU would mean relinquishing this newfound independence and submitting once again to the rules and regulations of the Bloc. As the debate continues, one thing is certain: the question of the UK's potential return to the EU is not merely a hypothetical exercise. It's a live issue with the potential to reshape the future of both the UK and the European Union. The complexities of this decision require a nuanced understanding of the historical context, the current political climate, and the potential implications. The UK's relationship with the European Union was complex and often characterised by a degree of ambivalence. While embracing the economic benefits of membership, the UK also maintained a distinct identity and negotiated special arrangements that set it apart from other member states. One of the most significant examples of the UK's special treatment was its decision to opt out of the euro, the single currency adopted by a majority of EU member states. This decision reflected the UK's long-standing attachment to its own currency, the pound sterling, and a desire to maintain control over its monetary policy. In addition to the euro opt-out, the UK also negotiated an exemption from the Schengen Agreement, which abolished border controls between most EU countries. This decision was driven by concerns about maintaining control over its borders and managing immigration flows. These opt-outs gave the UK a distinct position within the EU, allowing it to cherry-pick aspects of membership while retaining a degree of autonomy. This approach, while pragmatic in the short term, also sowed the seeds of discontent, fueling perceptions among some that the UK was not fully committed to the European project. The UK's unique position was a source of both admiration and frustration for its European partners. The UK's decision to keep the pound sterling as its currency was deeply symbolic, reflecting a strong sense of national identity and economic independence. The pound, with its long and storied history, was seen as a tangible representation of British sovereignty and a source of national pride. Maintaining control over its currency allowed the UK to set its own interest rates and manage its monetary policy independently of the European Central Bank. This flexibility was seen as crucial for responding to economic shocks and tailoring policies to the specific needs of the UK economy. However, the decision to stay outside the Eurozone also had its drawbacks. It created a currency barrier for British businesses trading with Eurozone countries, adding transaction costs and exchange rate volatility. Despite these drawbacks, the UK government remained steadfast in its commitment to the pound, arguing that the economic and political costs of joining the euro outweighed the benefits. The issue of the euro became a lightning rod for broader debates about European integration and the UK's place in the world. The UK's decision to opt out of the Schengen Agreement was driven by a complex interplay of factors, including concerns about security, immigration, and national sovereignty. The Schengen Agreement, which abolished internal border controls within most EU countries, was seen by some in the UK as a potential threat to national security. Proponents of the opt-out argued that maintaining control over its borders was essential for preventing illegal immigration, combating terrorism, and preserving national identity. They argued that the free movement of people within the Schengen area made it more difficult to track potential criminals and terrorists, increasing the risk of security threats. However, critics of the opt-out argued that it created unnecessary barriers to travel and trade, harming the UK's economy and limiting opportunities for its citizens. They pointed out that the free movement of people within the EU was a fundamental principle of the single market, and that restricting it would damage the UK's economic competitiveness. The Schengen opt-out, like the Euro opt-out, became a symbol of the UK's ambivalent relationship with the EU. It reflected a desire to engage with Europe on its own terms, balancing the benefits of integration with the perceived need to protect national interests. The euro, the single currency shared by most EU states, is a major barrier to the UK's return. The Maastricht Treaty mandates euro adoption for new members. Signed in 1992, it aims for economic integration. New members must meet economic criteria to adopt the euro. The euro fosters stability and economic ties. It simplifies trade and investment. For the UK, this is a dilemma. Adopting the euro means ceding monetary control. Many in the UK see this as a loss of sovereignty. The euro dilemma cuts to the heart of a fundamental tension within the UK's relationship with the EU. Maintaining control over its currency allows the UK to set its own economic course. This flexibility is valuable in times of economic uncertainty. During the 2008 financial crisis, the UK devalued its currency to boost its economy. However, opting out of the euro creates a currency barrier with the EU. This barrier adds transaction costs and exposes businesses to exchange rate volatility. It also limits the UK's influence within EU decision-making bodies. The UK faces a difficult trade-off between monetary sovereignty and economic integration. Public opinion, a divided nation on the euro. The issue of the euro is deeply divisive within the UK, reflecting broader societal debates about national identity, sovereignty, and the country's place in the world. Public opinion on the euro has fluctuated over the years, shaped by economic conditions, political rhetoric, and perceptions of the EU. Those opposed to the euro often cite concerns about losing control over the UK economy, arguing that decisions about interest rates and currency valuations should be made in London, not Frankfurt, where the European Central Bank is headquartered. They view the euro as a symbol of European integration gone too far, a threat to British sovereignty and national identity. Conversely, proponents of the euro argue that it would boost the UK economy by reducing transaction costs, promoting trade, and attracting investment. They point to the economic stability enjoyed by many Eurozone members, arguing that joining the single currency would provide a shield against global economic turbulence. Public opinion polls conducted in recent years suggest that a majority of Britons remain opposed to joining the euro. However, these polls also reveal a significant minority who are open to the idea, particularly among younger generations and those who see the UK's future as closely tied to the EU. The economic argument, weighing the costs and benefits. The economic case for and against the euro is complex and subject to ongoing debate. Proponents argue that joining the single currency would bring significant economic benefits, eliminating transaction costs, promoting trade and investment, and providing greater economic stability. They point to the experience of other European countries that have adopted the euro, many of which have seen increased trade and foreign investment since joining the single currency. They also argue that the Eurozone's monetary policy set by the European Central Bank has been effective in maintaining price stability and controlling inflation. Opponents of the euro counter that it would deprive the UK of the ability to set its own interest rates and exchange rates, potentially harming its competitiveness and making it more vulnerable to economic shocks. They point to the Eurozone's struggles with high unemployment and sluggish growth in some member states as evidence of the single currency's limitations. Ultimately, the economic impact of the euro on the UK is difficult to predict with certainty. It would depend on a complex interplay of factors, including the UK's economic structure, its trading relationships, and the overall health of the Eurozone economy. The economic calculus, balancing benefits and drawbacks. The economic implications of the UK rejoining the EU are complex, with potential benefits and drawbacks. Proponents argue it would boost the UK economy, restoring access to the EU's single market. Increased trade, investment, and economic growth are potential benefits. Regulatory alignment could reduce costs and facilitate trade. Opponents caution about economic costs and loss of sovereignty. Significant contributions to the EU budget could be a financial burden. The debate continues, requiring careful consideration of benefits and drawbacks. Regulatory alignment, navigating the single market's rules. Rejoining the EU means aligning with its complex regulatory framework, ensuring fair competition and consumer protection. The UK played a role in shaping these rules, but has since diverged post-Brexit. Realignment could reduce trade barriers, but requires accepting EU regulations again. Immigration and free movement. A perennially contentious issue, immigration, a key issue in Brexit, remains divisive as the UK considers rejoining the EU. The EU's free movement allows citizens to live, work and study across member states. This principle promotes integration but raises concerns about jobs and public services. Brexit proponents argued ending free movement was necessary to control immigration. Rejoining the EU would likely require accepting free movement again. This could face resistance from those who voted to leave to reduce immigration. Addressing these concerns requires balancing benefits with legitimate concerns. Compromise on immigration is crucial for any future UK government. Engaging in dialogue with EU partners and addressing public concerns is essential. The UK's potential rejoining of the EU is fraught with political complexities, leaving the EU strained relationships between the UK and its European neighbours. Rebuilding trust is essential for any future attempt at rejoining the Bloc. The UK's departure exposed deep divisions within British society. Rejoining the EU would likely reignite these divisions. Navigating this landscape requires deft diplomacy and compromise. The EU has undergone significant changes since the UK's departure. The Bloc faces internal challenges, including economic disparities and the war in Ukraine. These challenges could make the EU less receptive to the UK's return. A fundamental shift in political dynamics is required on both sides. The UK must demonstrate a commitment to European integration, while the EU must recognise the benefits of a strong, engaged partner. The UK's decision to leave the EU cast a long shadow over its relationship with the Bloc. The acrimonious negotiations left a residue of resentment and mistrust on both sides. Many in the EU felt the UK had betrayed European solidarity. The UK's uncompromising stance fueled perceptions of underestimating Brexit complexities. Subsequent disputes over trade and the Northern Ireland Protocol reinforced this perception. The EU saw Brexit as a rejection of integration and cooperation principles. The EU had to expend considerable resources on Brexit negotiations. The scars of Brexit run deep, especially among those who built strong UK partnerships. Rebuilding trust requires acknowledging past grievances and demonstrating commitment to constructive dialogue. The UK's political landscape, marked by frequent changes in leadership and policy, raises concerns about its commitment to European integration. The EU values stability and predictability, wary of disruptions to its equilibrium. The UK's history of opt-outs and Brexit fuels fears of internal division. A stable, committed UK is seen as a more reliable partner for the EU. The UK's departure from the EU raised concerns about the bloc's future and the potential for a domino effect of exits. The EU aimed to deter other exits by emphasising the costs and complexities of leaving. Rejoining the EU would require the UK to meet all membership criteria without special exemptions. This would send a clear message that rejoining the EU is a serious commitment. The UK's return to the EU requires full membership, embracing all rights and obligations. The EU insists on integration and a level playing field. The UK must accept the euro and EU monetary policy. Free movement of people is essential. This choice impacts sovereignty and national identity. The UK's decision will shape its future. Predicting the future of the UK's relationship with the EU is a fool's errand. Too much depends on unpredictable factors, the shifting sands of British politics, the EU's own evolution, and the ever-changing dynamics of the global landscape. However, one thing is certain. The debate over the UK's relationship with Europe is far from over. It will continue to shape the country's political discourse, influence its economic trajectory, and colour its perception of its place in the world. Public opinion, once inflamed by the passions of the Brexit referendum, may evolve as the economic and political consequences of leaving the EU become clearer. New generations, less tethered to the historical narratives that shaped the Brexit debate, may bring fresh perspectives and priorities to the fore. The UK and the EU, once bound by a complex and often contentious partnership, are now charting their own courses. Whether those courses will one day converge again, leading to a renewed partnership, or diverge further, solidifying the separation, remains to be seen. Only time will tell what the future holds for these two intertwined entities.